People often ask me about negotiating tactics, and I always think back to the story of a piece of work I did for a client in Paris when we were negotiating the sale of a vineyard. What actually happened was, this was a very famous vineyard down in Bordeaux, very close to Bordeaux, and they were trying to sell it for quite a lot of money. But the people that were buying it thought they could get it at a very cheap deal. And they used all sorts of negotiation tactics on us, and I want to describe some of those to you. So the first thing they did was they wouldn't allow the meeting to take place till 6 o'clock in the evening. So they said, we can't meet you until 6 o'clock in the evening in Paris. Second thing they did was they made some phone calls to the people that work for us, threatening legal action and all sorts of things. And that was a type of good guy, bad guy tactic they played on us. So off we went to France, and we took with us a French speaker. And we didn't tell the French people that we had a French speaker with us. We let them assume that perhaps we didn't understand when they talked in French. Anyway, we get to the meeting at 5:30 in the afternoon, and they haven't arrived. And bearing in mind it's on their premises, they said, very sorry, they're still out. And they turn up at 6:15, 3/4 of an hour late. They invite us into the meeting room, and they sit on one side, we sit on the other. Very aggressive sort of negotiating position, eyeball to eyeball. And they're very slow. They offer us some coffee. Sometimes they speak in French, and they suddenly at about 8 o'clock they say to us that they think that we're flying back on the 9:45 flight from Charles de Gaulle Airport to Heathrow. They assumed that we had a time problem, and they pushed the negotiations at that point. There's a negotiation tactic there that I want to talk to you about, the 80-20 rule. 80% of the concessions usually come in the last 20% of the negotiation time. So you have to be really careful about time. Secondly, they assumed that we didn't speak French. We had a French speaker with us. So when we took a timeout, which is another good negotiation tactic, and a break, we could understand what they were saying. And the third thing was the seating plan was particularly aggressive to put us in a difficult position. Well, when it came to 8:45 in the evening, suddenly they realised that we didn't have a time problem, but they did, because they had to go to another meeting at 10 o'clock in the evening. Suddenly they were in panic. They pressed us to close the deal and were surprised that we didn't, and we had to re-adjourn to have another meeting 10 days later when we sorted things out. That was an interesting thing I learned, and that was the beginning of how I learned that you have to understand tactics, you have to understand when people are using tactics on you, and you understand the types of tactics that they use. But the golden rule is make sure you understand the tactics being played on you. So frequently when I'm talking to people, they ask me about understanding negotiation tactics. It's very important that you do understand a tactic, because a tactic's used on you to make you feel weaker in the negotiating position. So let me talk to you about some of the tactics. Well, number one is just flinching, just saying, that's really expensive. You've got to do better than that. How do you feel when someone does that to you if you really want the deal? It's more likely to drive you down towards your bottom line. Tactic two, I have a better offer from somebody else, you better sharpen your price. True or false? You don't know, but it's a good tactic. Next tactic, you're far too expensive. You need to do something about that. How do you handle that? They're all forms of flinching or whatever. I remember the story about President Khrushchev of the USSR when he was negotiating in at the United Nations, and he actually was passed a shoe by one of his colleagues to bang on the table just at the point where he was saying it was outrageous what the Americans were doing with the nuclear arms disarmament, etc., etc. When they played the videotape back, they watched the aide pass the third shoe to him rather than him take his shoe off. It was all pre-planned negotiation tactic. And of course, banging your shoe on the table in half the countries in the world would be a complete insult to the other side. Now, one of the most common negotiation tactics is using higher authority. In other words, saying I have to refer to the committee, I have to refer to the directors, I have to refer to the board of directors or whatever. Or even some people say, well, I have to run that past my wife. It's a bit expensive. She's really cost conscious. We don't have that sort of money in our budget. So what you're doing is you're third partying it and blaming somebody else. The next tactic is good cop, bad cop, where you can be the good person and the other person is the higher authority that you're blaming. When they like you and you're trying to get the deal, they're more likely to give you more information, answer questions better, etc. So you've got that rapport. The third tactic I want to mention is time, using time to your advantage. The person that controls the time usually controls the negotiation. If someone's got time pressure, they need to leave the meeting. 80% of the concessions come in the last 20% of the negotiation time, according to popular research. The next tactic is using silence. Ask a really good question and then remain silent and see what answers you get. And as you can see, it's funny when there's that silence. That was only 3 seconds, but it seemed a very long time indeed. Another tactic is called the Columbo tactic, from Lieutenant Columbo. Peter Falk, the actor, made a series of TV programs in the 70s and 80s when he always used the tactic, I don't really understand. Can you run that past me again? When if he didn't understand it, or he thought someone was spinning them a line, or he wasn't telling the truth, he'd get them to tell the story again. And sometimes it's more difficult when you're trying to convince someone for the second time or the third time. The next tactic is watching the body language, bringing somebody with you, so when you ask a difficult question they can watch the body language. So maybe they go, oh well, you know, yeah, we can't do that, or we can do that, when they're folding their arms. If they're saying they like something but at the same time they fold their arms, the folding of the arms is a negative and yet the positive is saying they like something. So picking stuff up from the body language, research says it's 5 times more difficult to lie with the body language than it is with the voice. So that's pretty useful to know. So understanding tactics in negotiations is crucial. I've given you some of the more popular tactics. What you really need to know is when someone's playing a tactic on you, stop, think, ask yourself why, and maybe take a break and think about how to respond.